Personally, I hope we draft Joe Burrow again this year. Welcome to the Jungle, Bengals fans. I'm Kyle Phelps, and we're less than a month away from the biggest 3 days of the NFL offseason, and one of the only parts that anybody really ever actually cares about all that much, the NFL Draft. But before we dive into it today, I'd just like to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. As always, it helps to know when I release all of my content, but it also helps my channel out immensely. Speaking of which, we just crossed over 300 subs the other day, so let's fucking go! The Bengals had a pretty good showing in free agency this year. I gave them a B in my free agency recap video, which you should go totally check out here, because I know where I'm pointing. I don't know. Update on that, by the way, the Bengals also went out and got some edge depth with my fellow Bobcat, Terrell Basham, baby. In seriousness, it's a solid signing that helps shore up an underrated position of need on the team. But the important part is he went to my alma mater. OU, oh yeah, baby, let's go! At this point, I think the Bengals are pretty much done in free agency, barring a surprise Ezekiel Elliott signing, which to me kind of feels dead in the water at this point, right? Like, it honestly kind of feels like nobody wants him. Poor guy. You know, I've already made my feelings about this one known. I think he'd be a good addition to the team. But with the Bengals not picking up a running back, it does leave a pretty massive hole on the roster, and the Bengals will need to address that at some point in the draft. For the most part, though, the Bengals have done a fantastic job of filling all of their needs in free agency. That's the real reason why I love that Basham signing so much, guys. Other than running back, the Bengals are pretty much free to do whatever they like in this draft. Of course, there's always going to be some element of need that they're going to need to pay attention to, right? But having the luxury of focusing on best player available as much as possible, that's always a good thing. So I will be releasing mock drafts plenty over the next month, likely in the form of shorts. I'm also going to do my annual first round mock draft for every team that I've done pretty much every year since I was 15 years old. But I didn't want this video to just be another mock draft video. That's not really the point of this video. There's plenty of those, and we don't need more of them. I wanted to take a look at the Bengals roster and kind of lay out a blueprint or a strategy of sorts so we can take that into the draft itself, right? As I said, I don't think the Bengals really have any major needs this year, but I mean, there's definitely some positions that I think it makes more sense to prioritize over others, right? So for example, I know a lot of y'all can't get Bijan Robinson out of your heads. I get it. He's a very talented player. He's very impressive, very good. But the fact of the matter is using a first-round pick on a running back is almost always a waste, no matter how good they are, honestly. Over the last 5 years, we've seen Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Rashad Penny, and Sony Michel go in the first round. Almost all of those running backs are very good players. There's like one or two that didn't work out. But how many of them really made that much of a difference in the fortunes of their teams? Like, I know Saquon Barkley did last year, but that was only after years of injuries piling up kind of cut into his production, and until last year, made him look like a really weird use of a first-round pick at best, and now he's going to need a new contract soon. So I might make a whole video about how taking a running back in the first round is just a terrible idea. That's not this video, but maybe look forward to that here soon. So, yeah, I definitely think the Bengals should address running back in this draft, for sure. But save it, I think, for when the value is much higher. See Tyjae Spears from Tulane in the 4th round, or Chris Rodriguez from Kentucky in the 6th round. Like, either of those would be great options. In my opinion, the first and second days of the draft should be more focused on more highly impactful positions. And for the Bengals, that probably means offensive line, defensive line, secondary. I'm not necessarily one of those guys like, we gotta go offensive tackle in the first round, but if we do, I'm not as upset as if we go running back in the first round, right? Tight end is another option. You know, if you get lucky and an impact player like Michael Mayer falls to you at 28, but I'm not okay with trading up for him either. I also wouldn't be upset with Dalton Kincaid at this point, but at that point you're definitely pushing the value, and I'm just not sure at that point, really. Also, not a lot of people are talking about it, but I think the Bengals should consider at some point, like 6th or 7th round, drafting a punter like Bryce Behringer from Michigan State or Adam Korsak from Rutgers, probably in the 7th round. Like, really not much higher than that, 6th at most. I was just talking about positional value earlier, and punter just doesn't have it. I do think having great kicking specialists on your team is highly underrated. The Bengals do seem to have found a really good kicker in the draft with Evan McPherson. Although I think, despite, me being initially impressed last year, I don't quite think Drew Chrisman has what it takes to be like the long-term solution for the Bengals at punter, especially the way he played in the AFC Championship game. It wasn't good. His hang time and average punting length definitely trailed off as the season went along last year overall. So at the end of the day, winning the field position game is a boost for your team, no matter how little people care about punters these days. I just don't think that you need to really take one much earlier than the 6th round. Like, the value really just isn't there. It also might be worth looking at taking a backup quarterback in the later rounds. No higher than the 5th because, again, we're talking about value, and honestly, if Joe Burrow goes down, we're screwed no matter what. Like, drafting A.J. McCarron in the 4th was a great move back in the day, but that's because you never really felt like Andy Dalton was just critical to the team's success, right? Hell, they got closer to winning a playoff game for the first time in my life with McCarron behind center than they ever did with Dalton. And I'm a big Dalton fan, and I'm saying that, right? But if Joe Burrow goes down, the Super Bowl runs over, guys. It's just not happening. I'm sorry. Like, Nick Foles is not in this upcoming draft class, and just the Nick Foles that currently exists is not going to replace Joe Burrow. So just put it out of your mind. It's not happening. Although, I do think if there's one more signing coming from the Bengals this offseason, it might be a guy like Trevor Siemian, who they did meet with on Tuesday. I think Brandon Allen is pretty much done in Cincinnati, but I also think that we should be careful not to overcorrect there, right? The only positions that I would be shocked to see the Bengals considering this year are wide receiver and linebacker. Like, I think we're good there. Maybe you bring in some college free agents to push the back of the roster guys like Trent Irwin and Keandre Jones, but using a draft pick on a guy who probably won't make the roster in the first place, I think is just a bit silly. Like, I'm not against picking up a guy and then, like, maybe cutting him later if he was, like, a 7th round pick or something like that. But you don't take the guy with the expectation that you're going to cut him, right? So that's my blueprint, y'all. Like I said, I'll put out some actual mock drafts, mostly shorts, probably in that realm, as well as my annual first-round mock draft for every team at some point over the next month, right? But for now, let me know what you guys think the Bengals should address in the comments below, and I'll feature the best ones in my next video, like this one from Tucker Flynn, who said in my free agency grades video, I think they're slightly better, huge upgrade at left tackle, hoping we can score in the draft. So for me, I think that they're a little bit more than slightly better, and because of that huge upgrade at left tackle, right? The only position I feel they really took a massive step back in is at free safety, and even then, there's the possibility that Dax Hill, actually turns into what we were expecting him to be this year. So, but other than that, I don't think the Bengals took a step back at any of the positions at all. But hell yeah, let's go. Thanks for commenting, Tucker. I really appreciate it. Anyway, until next time, y'all can always catch more of what I do at KylePhelps92 on Twitter, Facebook.com/ThePhelps, Butt Fumbles Sports, the Battle of Ohio podcast on the Spot Pod Network, and right here if you subscribe. Personally, I hope we draft Joe Burrow again this year. I'll leave y'all, as always, with a hoo-day!